now that I've got my design, I'm gonna start putting it on my needle. I like to start stringing with the words because I know that that's not gonna change, but as I go, I can play with the way that the beads stack together in the design of my bracelet. Just string it on, just like this.
String it on.
Or you can string it straight onto your stretch cord if you want. The advantage of using this little needle is I think it's a lot easier on the hand if you're doing a lot of stringing. So I've got some of my design done and I want to go back and add some spacer beads right here. So this is why I love the needle. You can just take them off and now you can add those spacers. It makes everything really fast and easy.
So we're going to start with wrapping this center wrap right here. So we're going to use our wrap makers. And these wrap makers, they've got a long side of the jaws and then this short side. The long side is going to hold on to the wire frame, and the shorter side, that we're going to use that to hold on to our wrap wire. So line up that long side of the jaws just outside the area that you want to wrap. And if you just put a little bit of pressure on there, you're going to notice it's going to flatten your wires out. And that's another good thing. It keeps these wires nice and flat. Take your half round. And when you do this, it opens a gap in between the jaws. And that's going to allow us to add this wrap wire in. So insert that wrap wire on the opening on the short side until it bottoms out, until it doesn't go in anymore. And then give it a squeeze. Just give the handles just a slight squeeze, and that will allow you to start to make your wraps. So about every 4 wraps, I want you to stop, and we're going to set the wrap. And I'll show you what that means in just a second. So there's my 4th one. So we're going to take the pliers off, and I just want you to give it just a squeeze. Just squeeze that wrap, and then you can just hold on. You don't need to put the wrap wire back in, but you can hold on to the bundle and just keep wrapping. We're going to wrap until we get to this other far side of the center.
You have 2 choices when it comes to ear wires. You can make your own, or you can get some pre-made ear wires. I have a couple that I already made right here, but if you want to, you can take some 20 gauge wire, just like the Bead-A-Line 18 gauge wire I used. 20 gauge is just a little bit, I don't know, it's a little thinner basically, so it feels a little better in your ear than 18 gauge. So what you can do is you can actually take 20 gauge wire in this medium temper and make your own earring. So I'm using that 6-step bail shaping plier for this. I'm just going to grab the end and the smallest bail on the bail shaping plier and roll this into a circle similar to what you just saw. That a little bit farther there. Boom. And then turn it over, go to the largest bail on the bail shaping plier and roll this over and around. And as you can see, whoa, that kind of looks like an ear wire, doesn't it? And just trim that off using your flush cutter. Once again, plier 61, a fantastic plier.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make these little post backs for our earring. And I'm going to use our 20 gauge gold tone wire. And I'm just going to cut about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. That's going to be a little bit more than we need, but we'll trim it after we make our shape. And we are going to need a mallet and a bench block for this part. We're going to really work harden these earring posts so that they're nice and sturdy when we put them in our ears and put the earring backs on. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I really want to flatten out this piece of wire. Before I make my loop, I want to get it nice and flat. All right, so now that we've got it nice and flat, we're going to make a loop on one end. So we're going to grab our round nose pliers and we're going to grab right at the very edge of our wire. And we're just going to make a little loop. I'm going to come down on my pliers pretty far because I want this loop to be as small as possible. I don't want it to be really obvious in the earring or to stand up off of the earring too much. So I want it to be close in size to the beads that I'm using. So I'm just going to make a little loop, curl this back on itself like that. And then we're going to give that a good hammer, get that nice and hard and nice and flat. Okay, so now I'm going to trim down my post to about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. That's kind of your standard post size. You can go, depending on the shape and the size of your earlobes, you can adjust that as needed. So I'm going to use my flush cutters and I'm going to trim down to about a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch. Give that a nice clip. And then I'm going to use my needle file to round out the end of my post. If you have a reaming tool, your reaming tool comes with a cut burr. So you can use the cut burr end for your reaming tool to round out the end of your ear wire too. I like to use a file. I think it's a little bit faster sometimes. And I can really customize the shape of this end of this wire. So I'm just rolling this wire in my hand while I'm running across it with the file. So that way I'm getting a nice rounded shape on the end and I'm getting all the little sharp edges off. You kind of want your post to come to a little bit of a point, not too sharp, but a little bit of the point. That way you can direct it through your hole easily and it goes in smoothly. But the most important thing is to not have any jagged edges or sharp edges on this because that will really hurt when you're trying to put it on. You can run your finger across the end of it, and if you feel any sharp places, just go back in with your file and keep smoothing it out. All right, so that feels pretty good. Just gonna go back in and hammer this and make sure again that it's nice and flat. The most important part about this, making this post, is that you get it as hard and as work hardened as you can get it. That way it doesn't collapse or deform when you're putting it on. So I'm going to use this lighter to pop my bubbles. You can use any kind of heat source. I think I've seen some people use blow dryers, but I like to really make sure I'm getting rid of my air bubbles. So I'm going to use the big guy. So I'm just going to turn my torch on and I'm going to step back a little bit. I don't want to get too close to my mold. And I'm just gonna kiss the resin with my torch. And I don't know if you guys could see the air bubbles popping as I did that, but it looks like, and sometimes you can pop them with your pick tool, and like those popped. I think I've got all of my bubbles popped. One reason why that's so important is that, especially on the edges, when we pull this out of the mold, if you had bubbles on your edge, then your edge is going to have craters in it, and you really don't want that. It's one thing to have bubbles like in the middle of your piece, but to have them on the edges, it kind of ends up looking like Swiss cheese, and it's really hard to clean up and to fix. You have to do a lot of filing, a lot of sanding, and it just adds time and headache to your piece.